Welcome. In this video, I'll show you the top 5 traps in the Queen's Gambit for black. The most popular variations from this position are the Queen's Gambit accepted, the Queen's Gambit declined with pawn to e6, the Slav defense with pawn to c6, and the Albin counter-gambit. Let's begin with the most beautiful trap. We'll start with the Albin counter-gambit. White captures the pawn, and then black plays pawn to d4. This is all standard theory. Now, the most popular and probably the best move here is knight to f3, but the second most popular move, which quite a lot of players choose, is pawn to e3. The idea behind this move is that black's advanced pawn is restricting white's knight, so white wants to eliminate it, and pawn to e3 seems like the best way to do so. But here's where you can start setting up your trap. First, bishop to b4, delivering a check. Blocking with the bishop is the most natural response. Now we capture the pawn on a 3, tempting white to grab the seemingly free bishop. If white gets greedy and takes it, they are in serious trouble. Let me show you how. First, pawn captures on e3. This is a check. The king must support its pieces, so it moves to e2. Now, if you take the knight and promote to a queen, white can simply exchange queens first. Since it's a check, you are forced to recapture, and then white takes your other queen. If you assess the position, the game appears almost equal, but we are looking for a decisive advantage. That's why, in this position, the killer move is to capture on g1 and promote to a knight, not a queen. Since this is a check, white has no opportunity to exchange queens. So, for example, if rook captures on g1, then you have bishop to a 6 check, and it's goodbye to the queen. In this position, even if white plays king to e1, you still have queen to h4 check. If the king moves to d2, then knight to c6, allowing you to activate your bishop, possibly even castle queenside, and completely attack white's exposed king. Now, I want to go back to this position. Even if white does not capture the bishop and instead takes the pawn on e3, you still have queen to h4 check. After that, you can jump to e4, attacking the rook. This still gives black a much better position, so even if white doesn't fall for the full trap, you will still have an early advantage. Alright, now let's check out another cool trap in the Albin counter-gambit. After white captures the pawn, black plays pawn to d4. Then, knight to f3 attacks the pawn, and knight to e6 defends it. Now instead of pawn to e3, white might consider developing the knight to d2, since the c3 square is controlled by the pawn on d4. In this case, queen to e7 is a strong move. Here, white has many ways to go wrong. We are putting pressure on the pawn on e5 while also threatening an attack along the open diagonal. If white gets worried about this and plays pawn to a 3, this is the move you'll most often see. Now, you can capture the pawn on e5, and if white captures your pawn on d4, it's a huge blunder. White is completely lost. Can you find the crushing move for black? It is knight to d3, delivering a stunning smothered checkmate. White cannot capture the knight with the pawn on e2 because it is pinned to the king by the queen. Moving on, let's look at one of the most famous traps in the Queen's Gambit declined, which begins with pawn to e6. Then knight to c3 and knight to f6, with both sides controlling the center. Next, bishop to g5, pinning the knight on f6 to the queen. Here, black plays the tricky move knight to d7. At first glance, after the pawn trade on d5, it seems like white can easily capture the pawn on d5 because the knight on f6 is pinned to the queen. But this is a huge blunder. Black can actually capture the knight on d5, and if bishop takes the queen on d8, black first plays bishop to b4 check. The king has no escape squares, so white is forced to sacrifice the queen to block the check. After the dust settles, black emerges with an extra piece, which is nearly a 3-point advantage. This famous trap is called the elephant trap. Alright, let's move on to the next idea. In a similar setup to the previous trap, white may avoid the elephant trap and instead continue with natural development. A common choice is pawn to e3, reinforcing the center. At this point, black can adopt a solid structure with pawn to c6, resembling a reverse London system. White often follows up with knight to f3, continuing normal piece development. Now, black introduces a bit of trickery with queen to a5, entering the Cambridge Springs defense, a setup known for its hidden tactical potential. If white proceeds with standard development, such as placing the bishop on d3 to prepare for castling kingside, black can take the opportunity to capture the pawn on c4. If white instinctively recaptures, black can strike with knight to e4, creating immediate tension. This move not only targets white's knight on c3, but also challenges the bishop on g5, setting the stage for tactical opportunities. At this point, White may become preoccupied with the knight on e4 and try to reinforce it with queen to c2, seemingly adding another defender while also attacking black's knight. However, this position is already ripe for black to seize the initiative. Many players overlook a key detail here. After a series of exchanges, black's queen can capture the knight, winning a piece outright. This is a mistake that countless players have fallen for. But let's step back for a moment. If white plays correctly, the best move is bishop to h4, avoiding the immediate loss. After some standard exchanges, black delivers a queen check, forcing white to block with the knight, maintaining protection over the bishop. Even in this best-case scenario for white, black still gains a pawn advantage and has potential attacking chances along the queen side. Now, there's another fascinating variation in the Cambridge Springs defense worth exploring. Instead of capturing the pawn on c4, black can immediately play knight to e4, creating immediate tension. If white responds with bishop captures knight, then after pawn recaptures, both the knight on f3 and bishop on g5 are under attack. At this point, white may try to counter with knight to e5, aiming for active play. Now, if black chooses to capture, white will naturally recapture, leading to an interesting dynamic position. It might be tempting to grab what looks like a free pawn, but this would be a huge blunder. White has a devastating tactical shot, queen to d8, delivering an unstoppable checkmate. Just like that, the game is over. So when playing the knight to e4 variation, you need to be extremely careful not to fall into this trap. Now, let's move on to another exciting idea. This time, instead of the queen's gambit declined, we explore a different approach.
After pawn to e6, white develops with knight to c3, and now we enter the Tarrasch defense with pawn to c5. Both sides start contesting the center, leading us into the aggressive Shaakh gambit. White captures the pawn on d4, reinforcing their central control, and now black develops with knight to c6. White cannot immediately take, as the queen would be hanging, so instead, they retreat the queen to d1. From here, black recaptures the pawn on d4, and after white's queen takes back, instead of trading queens, black continues development with bishop to e6, preparing for an active middle game. After white recaptures, black places the rook on the open file, and things are looking good. However, if white isn't careful and plays an overly passive or random move like pawn to a3, black has a devastating response, knight to d4. This move not only threatens a check, but more importantly, it sets up a checkmate. White has very few options for defense here. Even if they try to create some breathing room for their king, black can still deliver a check, and then capture the rook. Now, if we rewind to the earlier position, even a seemingly natural move like knight to f3 can lead to trouble for white. Black can respond with knight to b4, which brings about the same dangerous threat. White will still end up losing the rook, and the position will be decisively in black's favor. And that wraps up our list of the top 5 Queen's Gambit traps for black. These traps are not only effective, but can also catch your opponent off guard, turning the game in your favor early on. By understanding these ideas, you'll be able to punish white's mistakes and create strong tactical opportunities in your games. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more chess strategies and traps. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching,